Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Ignition Time. Folks, President Biden is making a big push for the major economic plan before he spends time, before he leaves for the European summits. Here's the headline of an article on your screen from Bloomberg. President Biden makes a final push for the economic deal before European summits. In fact, the president is expected to leave this Thursday and wants to try and achieve some sort of a consensus, specifically with conservative Democrats like Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, because these conservative Democrats and the progressive Democrats have been at odds over the entire bill. In fact, despite weeks of assurances from Democratic leaders that they're going to try and reach a consensus on how they'll raise money, how they'll spend money in this bill, progressives and moderates were continuing to argue about the aspects of the plan with very little signs of progress. Folks, I want you to know that in Washington, D.C., everything happens at a snail's pace until things happen with the snap of a finger. In other words, things happen at the last minute and it seems like nothing is happening until everything happens at the last minute. This is just the way Washington, D.C. works. In fact, the House Ways and Means Committee Chairman Richard Neal and the Senate Finance Committee Chairman Ron Wyden have argued publicly over how to pay for the measure. And House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has actually raised questions, and she said she's not even clear when this whole thing can go for a vote. So, folks, it is a bit of a circus. I'll be honest with you, it's a bit of a circus as far as the Democrats are concerned. And I want you to know that the Senate Budget Committee Chairman, Bernie Sanders, who's an independent from Vermont, has sharply criticized Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema for rejecting revenue proposals. And he actually went to the White House, and this is what Sanders said before going to the White House. Almost every sensible progressive revenue option that the president wants, that the American people want, that I want, seems to be sabotaged. Now, I want you to know that the White House has been spending time with Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, and the fact is the president needs the support of all Democrats in an evenly divided Senate if he needs to get his social spending plan through. In fact, this is what Sinema said: "We're doing great, we're making progress." And Manchin said something that I thought was pretty ominous. He said, "It's really up to the rest of the caucus. There's 50 of us and everyone has to participate." Now, the president is trying to get this structure together because this deal is going to be, remember, a $2 trillion deal with new spending for social and climate programs. And keep in mind, there's a climate change summit in Glasgow next week, and the president is actually leaving on Thursday of this week. So House Speaker Pelosi actually sent a letter to House Democrats, and she said the next step would be to vote on the infrastructure package. She also said that the Rules Committee would be speaking on Thursday on the Biden agenda. Now, I want you to know that what the progressives want, what Pramila Jayapal, the Democrat from Washington, and her dozen plus congressmen and congresswomen want, is that this infrastructure bill should be voted on along with the $2 trillion reconciliation bill, because they feel it's now or never. So, folks, it's starting to, all of these things are starting to come together. But, folks, this is all a matter of leverage, because, again, Progressive Caucus Chair Pramila Jayapal did say on Wednesday that her caucus would refuse to vote on the infrastructure bill until there is a vote on the broader economic agenda. And here's a quote from House Democratic Chair Hakeem Jeffries of New York. He said this: "I think a framework deal is likely in the next 24 to 36 hours. So it looks like things are starting to come together, and Democrats have said that they are coming to a consensus, but they've struggled to come up for a way to actually pay for all of this. Now, what's even more interesting is that there's some discord amongst the Democrats on how we'll end up paying for all this, and tax increases to pay for the plan by taxing billionaires have emerged as ideas. But Manchin said he was not in favor of a tax on billionaires. So, what have the Democrats been doing? Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, who's a New York Democrat, said that she was working with Manchin on a narrow parental leave provision that he can support, because he did say he was not supporting the parental leave provision. She said, "I'm working on the best, strongest, most robust plan I can with Joe Manchin, and hopefully he will accept my proposal." Now, this compromise proposal would allow 12 weeks of leave, but just for childcare. not illnesses, according to Senator Jean Shaheen of New Hampshire. So, folks, as you can start to see, Joe Manchin is the one figure who's essentially holding up the entire agenda. In fact, here's the headline of another article on your screen, also from Bloomberg. Manchin joins skeptics of plan to tax assets of billionaires. So, folks, you can start to see that Joe Manchin really is the one key figure who's standing in the way of the entire Biden agenda. In fact, Joe Manchin is the reason why President Biden could not get the $3.5 trillion plan and why he has to settle. It's funny I use the word settle when I'm talking about trillions of dollars, but President Biden has to settle for $2 trillion. And Manchin actually is a skeptic of a plan to tax billionaires. So now how is the Democratic Party, how is the White House going to actually pay for all of this if we don't tax billionaires? I have no idea. I think Joe Manchin will probably find trillions of dollars under his mattress, or we'll just have to get the money printer going again and get the Federal Reserve to just invent money and add a few more digits electronically to their balance sheet and then lend out the money to the Treasury, which then pumps the money into the economy, which, by the way, is exactly what happened with the CARES Act. That is exactly what happened last year with all the stimulus money. We actually essentially generated money out of thin air and sent out money that we didn't even have in an effort to keep the economy going, in an effort to keep money flowing through the system. Yes, folks, that is how the American economy is. But now I think we need to face some realities. And the reality is, if we have an infrastructure plan, if we try and create these new jobs, millions of new jobs, and if we try and redo our roads, bridges, our healthcare, and many aspects of our community, our physical infrastructure and our human infrastructure, as Democrats like to call it, the big question is, how are we going to pay for all this? Are we going to raise taxes on the middle class, or are we going to get the billionaires to pay their fair share? And I think billionaires should be paying more in taxes. I think millionaires should be paying more by way of taxes. But the big question is, how can the White House get it done if they don't get 50 votes in the United States Senate? And that is the challenge. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. My name is Dr. Nitin Chhoda with Ignition Time. Please click the like button. Please click subscribe. Please enable notifications. I appreciate you. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next episode of Ignition Time. Take care. Bye.